A few years ago, I successfully beat my sugar addiction, and it wasn't through just like mental toughness and gritting my teeth and like fighting through it. I actually just used a few pretty simple principles that kind of hacked my physiology and just naturally helped to stop my sugar cravings. It's honestly pretty magical and pretty amazing. These techniques have changed my life, it's changed my clients' lives. So in this 5-part sugar detox series, I'm going to share with you exactly how you can tackle your sugar addiction and really stop your cravings for good. My name's Autumn. I'm a certified clinical nutritionist with my master's nutrition human performance, and this is part 1 of the official sugar detox series. So first things first, we need to figure out, like, are you actually even addicted to sugar? The common signs of sugar addiction are that you need to have some type of sweet after pretty much every meal. Like if you just ate your lunch or if you just ate your dinner and you feel like you need to always end your meal with like some chocolate or a cookie or some type of sweet, that can be a big sign of a sugar addiction. On that same note, a meal just doesn't feel complete without having some type of sugary treat at the end of it. Another sign that you're addicted to sugar is that you reach for sugar whenever you're stressed. And this could obviously be major stresses, but also just the minor everyday stress of life. Another sign that you're addicted to sugar is that you describe yourself as having a sugar tooth. Interestingly, this isn't actually like just something inherent to our personality. I used to think that because that's how I described myself back in the day, but this actually is a big sign of a sugar addiction. And with a sugar addiction obviously comes a higher sugar intake or even a moderate sugar intake, which moderate is like a very loosely held term, but it's still something that we want to take seriously because a lot of things happen when we are addicted to sugar and when we eat a lot of it. Some of the more serious ones are things like higher insulin levels, which can eventually lead to type 2 diabetes, obesity, and then of course weight gain around the belly. Along those same lines of insulin resistance is PCOS. That's one of the main hallmark signs of PCOS is insulin resistance. Acne is very common with a higher sugar intake, likely from that higher insulin level, or even just constant hunger throughout the day, where if you feel like every couple of hours you need to eat, this is usually caused from these blood sugar crashes that are really common when you eat a lot of sugar. And then on maybe like a little bit more speculative note, but something that I have found very frequently with a higher sugar intake or higher anxiety levels. That was what I really struggled with, and what I found with my higher sugar intake is that my anxiety levels were just through the roof, which in order to understand why all these happen, we have to understand what sugar actually does when it enters our body. First, obviously, we eat the sugar. This sugar gets broken down first in our stomach, but mostly in our small intestine. From our small intestine, it's absorbed into our blood supply and really rapidly increases our blood sugar levels. Now, high blood sugar levels are actually really dangerous for the body. It increases something called AGEs, or advanced glycation end products, that can cause a lot of inflammation and a lot of cellular damage. So the body, when it sees this high blood sugar level after a higher sugar meal, works really hard to bring it back down. And it tries to do it quickly. And this is where storing hormone insulin gets rapidly produced and shuttled into the blood supply to store the sugar as fat or in the muscle and get it out of the blood. This process of storing shuts off fat burning and instead turns on, obviously, fat storing instead. Now, unfortunately, with this high blood sugar level and this higher insulin level often results in a crash in blood sugar because the body kind of overshoots in its attempt to quickly bring that blood sugar back down. We do need to have a stable blood sugar level, so when it first goes up and then quickly comes back down, it can go below that stable blood sugar line, which also sends off like red flag signs to our body, because there are certain cells that do need to have some type of sugar, like namely our red blood cells. So to remedy this, now our body starts to do 2 things. It pumps up our stress hormone cortisol, which does help to bring the blood sugar back up, but then we're left with this high cortisol state, this high stress state. And our body also cranks up our sugar cravings so that we're going to take in more sugar, which then cues those same sugar cravings that got us into this problem in the first place. So you can see how this sugar craving cycle is really cyclical. So what we need to do for this first step with a sugar detox is stop it. I know that sounds a little aggressive, but we need to stop this cycle. If we don't stop eating those high sugar, highly refined foods that cause this cycle in the first place, we're just going to keep continuing the cycle and never get out of it. I like to call this the clean slate. This is really the first step. It's not the only step, but it is a very important step when we're looking to actually detox from sugar and break our sugar addiction. This is usually a 7-day or sometimes a 14-day completely clean slate of all the foods that are really rich in sugar sugar or refined flours that can cause this blood sugar spike and fall so that we can help to prevent those cravings in the first place. We're looking to achieve a stable blood sugar level so that the cravings for sugar aren't going up. In other words, we need to get off the roller coaster so that we can actually start fresh. But we also need to know like what are the sugars that cause issues versus which are the ones that are perfectly fine, or at least perfectly fine for a lot of people. Because there is a big difference between like having a soda or a vanilla latte from Starbucks and having like a sweet potato or a piece of fruit. Each of these do contain some amount of sugar, but the impact it has on that roller coaster ride are completely different. And this comes down to how quickly those sugars are actually absorbed into our body, otherwise known as the glycemic load. Now you might have heard of the glycemic index in the past. This is a little different. We want to look at the glycemic load, which is a better indicator of how our body is actually responding to these sugars. Typically what the glycemic load finds is that the foods that are more processed, more refined, are going to be absorbed a lot faster and therefore cause a lot bigger spike and fall than some of the other less refined whole food products. Therefore, what we want to look at during this 7-day clean slate is removing all of those high glycemic load foods and sticking to low or medium glycemic load foods. Now, anything that scores above 20 on the glycemic load is considered high glycemic load. This would be things like pancakes, which scores a whopping 39 on the glycemic load, or cornflakes, just regular cornflakes, scores 20, not even sugary cornflakes. So all cereal out of the picture. Jelly beans, which I know is random, but it's tested on the glycemic load, and that has 22. Spaghetti, which has a score of 25. White rice, which has a whopping mind-blowing score of 35. Even brown rice is really high with a score of around 25. But then there's even some of these items that might seem healthy but are still really high glycemic load, like dried dates, which have a score of 35. There's a reason why it's used in like all of those different desserts. It's because they're very sweet. And what's interesting is that just pure added sugars like high fructose corn syrup or cane sugar or coconut sugar don't actually have on their own a super high glycemic load, but they do have a really addictive response when it comes to sugar and sugar intake, which is why during the 7-day clean slate, we'll want to get rid of those as well. Now, foods that do contain natural sources of sugar but aren't really high glycemic load include things like apples, which has a glycemic load of only 6, or a pear, which has a glycemic load of 4. Watermelon has a glycemic load of 8. Pineapple has a glycemic load of 11, which puts it into the category of more medium glycemic load. Carrots, which a lot of people think like are high in sugar, but only has a glycemic load of 1. And lentils, which has a glycemic load of 7. All proteins and all pure fats have a glycemic load of 0 because they don't contain any sugar or extremely small amounts of sugar, so they don't actually have an impact on our blood sugar level. So we want to make sure we're getting adequate amounts of protein and fat, especially during this 7-day clean slate. And this will become even more evident as we go through this sugar detox series of why you need to be getting enough of protein and fat and how much you need to be getting. And then of course, all of the leafy greens, the non-starchy veggies, kale, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, they essentially have a glycemic load of 0 as well. And I have a full blog post that I created just for this video with a full list of the foods that you'll want to avoid, as well as the foods that you'll want to stick to during this 7-day clean slate. So if you want that as like a handy resource with more information, I'll have that linked down in the description below. You can also find it on my blog at autumnlnutrition.com and just type in the search bar for the blog section, Sugar Detox. Now, this clean slate is really the first step. So make sure you tune in for the rest of this 5-part sugar detox series because we have a lot more information that we're going to cover and so many more tools where by the end of this, you just won't even crave sugar once you're actually applying these principles. So make sure you subscribe to my channel so you don't miss those videos. Or if you're watching this after the videos are already live, I'll have the playlist for the sugar detox series linked down in the description below so you can go ahead and watch through the whole thing. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in my next video for part 2 of the official sugar detox series.